Hi, welcome everyone. Today is March 21st, 2022, and then this is a fourth edition of our Writing Studios flagship speaking series, which is a Writers at Work. So here we are inviting a very impressive and then writers who's been doing groundbreaking work for mostly general public, and then we are having a conversation with the writer, and so that we can look into his life and career, and then how he's working in his own writing process. Here we have Professor Sharmita Lahiri, who's gonna introduce Mr. Suhrid Chattopadhyay.
Okay, there are many people, and I would also like to welcome Professor Shoikat Mujumdar, because it's very kind of him to be a guest for this session. So Shoikat, welcome. And I can see a lot of students from my class. So I say a welcome to all of you. And let me now have the delight of introducing Suhrid Chattopadhyay, Senior Deputy Editor, Frontline Magazine, the Hindu group. Suhrid's body of work is absolutely versatile. He does political reporting. He writes articles on various aspects of culture, sports, movies. He does a lot of interviews with a variety of people, ranging from actors to, in fact, recently he did an interview with Professor Majumdar about his latest books. And one of the biggest things about Suhrid is, if you don't know who's writing and you read these very different works, you will not know who he is. And he is himself a very interesting person, plays the guitar, has a wonderful collection of stamps, loves jazz, and is a bit crazy. Well, all geniuses are. And on a personal note, many of you who are in my class do know this. We have been friends from class 5 all the way through BA. And then, of course, this was not the day of social media, so we lost touch. But I came to know that there is a journalist called Suhrid Sankar Chattopadhyay, and since the name was so, generally uncommon, so I realized it is the guy who has been my class friend. So I started following his work. And then we reconnected recently on Facebook, one of the goods of the social media and today I'm meeting Suhrid online after 1995. That is when we finished our graduation. And on the last day, since we didn't have, these cameras that you have at your disposal so that you can go click, click, click all the time, we used to have the books where we asked friends to write something. And Suhrid wrote, "Hello in class 5, goodbye when we'll be old." Little did we know that we'll meet in 2022 in this way. So, and I'm just going to switch to Suhrid, because it's impossible to call a friend from class 5 Mr. Chattopadhyay. So a huge welcome, Suhrid. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Thank you so much for making it happen, Sharmita.
Nivid, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Lahiri. Thank you so much. Mr. Chattopadhyay, good evening.
Thank
you so much for accepting. Okay, thank you, Suhrid. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and joining us today at IIT Gandhinagar. This is an absolute honor to have you, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So if we could begin from the very beginning, could you please give us a brief overview of two things? Number one, what were the writings that you read as a young teenager, maybe? What were your early days of influence? And then how did that shape your journey of becoming a journalist?
Well, to tell you the truth, what I read had nothing to do with my career as a journalist. I come from a generation where it was considered if one is not inclined to science, or one did not have, or if one did not end up becoming an engineer or a doctor, one's life is bound in shallows and miseries. But thank heavens that's not the case, and that was never true. But that was the general perception. So I actually came into journalism by a process of elimination. Uh, I realized that there were things that I was good at, and one of them was writing. And there were certain things where I could use that skill. And the one that the job that required that skill the most, and where I could actually use that skill the most, was journalism. So I just chanced upon it. I
Okay,
wandered
and
into I wandered into it, so to speak.
all right, all right. So just to follow up on that, you said that writing is among your has always been one of your fortes.
Oh, yes.
It
Well, I
it
won't
has
say
it has
it's been one of my pleasures.
pleasures, of course, of
Yeah.
course, of course. So, what do you think is a speciality or a peculiarity when it comes to writing for journalism? Because I believe that among your daily action plans is that you need to come up with a simplistic and a more, if I may use the word, a more digestible way of portraying information for the general public. A piece of information that might be quite complex or might be complicated in its content matter as well as its nuances. So could you please take us through the process of making complex thoughts accessible to the general public through your writing?
Absolutely. It's a very simple process, but at the same time, it's not. For example, let's say there's a particular development which I'm about to write on. I'll take that development, I'll analyze it, I'll see where that development is coming from. I will look at its antecedents, I will see where the source of that thing is, what has snowballed into what is currently that development, and I will try and make intelligent, credible inferences about the repercussions and what is going to happen in the days to come because of this development. So that's as simple as that. Now, the point is that when you say we put it simplistically, it's not really as simple as that, because alongside the written word, the non-written word is also extremely important. You see, what I am writing is as important as what I'm implying. And as a journalist, I have great respect for my readers, and I have great respect for their intelligence, and I have great respect for their ability to read between the lines. So, as you said, like, nuance is the word that you used. It's true. We are not supposed to make direct statements. We are not supposed to raise a battle cry, so to speak. What we're supposed to do is chronicle our times and provide materials that will serve as the basis for future socio-political and historical research. But at the same time, it is also important to get our message across. So how do we get that message across? We get that message across through what I would call an arrangement of facts. You see, facts are the same. Everybody gets the same facts. What is important is that there are various facets to a particular fact. There are various angles of looking at a particular truth. The truth is the same, but there are various angles of perceiving it. As a writer, I will always approach a particular fact in a particular manner, but I will also keep in mind the other aspects and the other angles by which the matter can be perceived. And I will not neglect that as I am writing. And the fact is that, like I said, the reader will always know what is not written.
Of course. Of course. This is very interesting because what most bite-sized journalism does in today's day and age, something which has become popular for convenient consumption, is that it lays out the data straight and then does not go beyond the data in a way. It does not interpret or synthesize the data for the readers. As you said, that readers need to be respected for the nuance that they bring from their readership as well. So how do you think a good journalist or a good communicator can synthesize data and turn it into a narrative which is palatable for people to consume?
By simply respecting the news as it is and respecting it for its totality. By analyzing it, and by staying as much as possible detached to make it appear as unbiased and as possible. Now, like I said, in the arrangement of facts itself, one's personal bias may come through. But then again, like, you know, when you, again, like I said, that when you are also accepting the other person's point of view, and you're taking that into account, and you're using that, including that in your political analysis, in your narrative, that's where, like, you know, you make your case irrefutable.
This was something that Professor Lahiri was, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
No, so that's all. Like, you know, the point is that even in the case of, let's say, there have been so many elections, like, you know, just recently, so many elections. As a journalist, one must always keep a window of escape, for the want of a better term, open, so that, you know, even if one gets certain things wrong, one balances it out, saying that, yeah, I may get this wrong, but I've also said that, like, you know, this is likely to happen, but this may not happen for so and so reasons, for such and such reasons. And, like, you know, you have to present the whole picture together. See, the written word is, as you said, as you mentioned, like bites and bits of news, is that, like, you know, the written word is still considered sacrosanct for many people, for no other reason but because they have a longer shelf life. A bite and a visual will flit by you, and but a written word stays for a much longer period of time. And so there is greater responsibility on the part of the writer to remain credible and to not give way to one's personal biases and preferences. Everybody has personal biases and preferences.
Absolutely. And this is such a contentious point for all journalists to follow, because as people, as communicators, we approach the craft of writing as a means of personal expression, right? We always, at least in the classes that we teach, we always teach writing as a part of personal expression, but then we extrapolate to the scientific and to the academic components of writing, in which one has to be objective, in which one has to, without compromising the captivating aspects of writing, one has to bring in a sense of objectivity. And this was, if I may say so, this was also something that Professor Lahiri was very fondly telling me about, that in your writing, the objectivity is something that is never compromised across your entire career. Your objectivity, the voice with which you write, is consistent, and has always been something which you are the most well known for the objectivity that you bring onto the table. If I may ask, Suhrid, how? Because this is something that I believe is incredibly difficult to achieve for any communicator, to be unbiased or not let their personal opinion mingle with the information that they are eventually communicating. If you could just give a couple of practical tips as to how one can practice the craft of being objective in communication.
To tell you the truth, it's appearing to remain objective. That is the trick. Nobody is completely objective. Somewhere when you're writing an analysis, somewhere in your mind, you're wishing somebody would win or somebody would lose or something would happen or something you wish wouldn't happen. Somewhere in your mind, you are thinking like, this person ought to be brought to justice. This is wrong. There are other people who are, who have a different perspective on the same issue, who would think that, no, that person deserves whatever happened. Or so the point is to present one, to stick to the facts, and the trick is to present the facts in such a way to make the way you are addressing the subject, to make that irrefutable, to convince people that this is what is happening. Let them think for themselves. They will come to their own conclusions. But the point is that you're presenting all the facts. And as long as you're presenting all the facts, you can never go wrong. As long as if you're talking to one political party, it is important that one takes, the opinion of all the political parties of a particular, of a particular incident. And then let the readers decide. Now, it is true that we are as journalists, as journalists, journalism is expected to influence public opinion, but that public opinion is not supposed to be done through direct statements. That is supposed to be done through a presentation of facts. That is supposed to be done through an arrangement of facts. Otherwise, it becomes more like a propaganda piece or a defense piece or an apologist piece for a particular organization or party or event. And at the end of the day, for a journalist, his credibility, her credibility is of paramount importance. If that is lost, then it's very difficult to regain. And it can be lost. It can be lost by just one article.
Absolutely. That's a good point that you've raised, because I have a couple of questions to follow up or basis on credibility. And I want to bring in an element that maybe has been of concern in public debate for the past couple of years, for sure, especially in broadcast journalism, if not so much in print journalism. But how do you think one can tackle the desperate need to be sensational in reporting? And how does one navigate through sensationalism? And if you have any thoughts on that.
See, the thing is, I've always been, the last 26 years, I've been in the print media. I've never gone into electronic media or any other form of media. So, but I can understand what they're trying to do, because it's a highly competitive world, and they are trying to raise their TRP ratings. I think that's the term, and it's cutthroat competition. So the louder you get, the shriller you get, the more attention you try to grab, the more viewership you are likely to enjoy. But I can understand that, but that's a separate thing altogether. My field of journalism, which is print journalism, I feel there's always been, like, before the television media, there was always sensationalism in print journalism as well. And there were people who, there were newspapers that would not just here, but even abroad, there would be tabloid journalism, there would be sensational journalism. But at the end of the day, I think each and everything plays a role in forming public opinion. A person doesn't read just one newspaper. A person reads probably at least 5 newspapers, and each will present the same fact, perhaps in its own way. And somewhere in the midst of all those presentations, there will be an underlying strain of consistency, and that is what the individual really needs to know.
Certainly, certainly.
And then come to and then decide for herself whether she agrees with the Hindu, or whether she agrees with the Indian Express, or whether she agrees with the Hindustan Times or the Telegraph or whatever.
Certainly. And here's, if I may just take back our conversation to style, and continue on the same stream of thought. Since each of these publications have a different set of professionals working towards refining their style of writing as much as possible, after a certain point of time, to a clever eye and to a clear eye, one can identify the styles of journalism across all of these platforms quite clearly, right? So what do you think, and we'd love to know from an insider's point of view more particularly, what is the process of editing like for a journalist and for a publication house on a day-to-day basis? How is language refined and how is writing refined through the process of editing, both in beat journalism as well as long form feature journalism?
Well, language is everything. As far as print is concerned, language is everything. It's how you communicate, it's how you get your idea across. And so every writer will have her own style, and every writer will present her own opinion across, or present her own views across in her own manner. So that varies, that differs from people to people, that differs from, I don't think anymore, I don't think that newspapers have a uniform style. They may have a uniform agenda, they may have a uniform, they may have their own individual slant, but I don't think anybody is asked to conform to a particular style of writing. I mean, there are certain, like for example, like there are certain publications which will insist on writing Mr. So and so and Ms. So and so while they're like talking about people. Certain publications will not; they'll just write the names of the. But those are just like those are unimportant matters. I don't think there is any uniformity of style. Every writer is given her own independent style to pursue. And I suppose every writer is also free to choose the core issue of the subject that she is writing on, and what to focus on in in a particular development. For example, let's say an election where one party loses and one party wins, right? One writer may present it as a huge victory for one party, and another writer may present it as a huge loss for another party. But the fact is, it's still the same. The result is still the same. It's how you project, so like massive loss for this, or massive victory for so and so. But the fact is, the election results are the same.
Are the same, of course. Suhrid, across your career, across, as you said, a career spanning more than 2 decades, yeah. If I may ask you, what have been some of the hallmarks, right? What have been some of the rewarding experiences, some daunting experiences? If you could please share a couple of stories, that would be really interesting for us to know.
Well, I don't know. Every day has been a pleasure. I can't think of doing anything else other than this. I don't know how to do anything else other than this. I joined the profession when I was 22 years old, and I'm still around. For the better or for worse, here I am. And I'll tell you, the best thing about my profession is that it allows me to go to places which most people perhaps didn't even know existed. It allows me to confront truths that people only read about. It gives me access to important people, not so much as access to important people. It gives me access to important people to ask them questions that a whole lot of people would want to ask. And I get to do that. I get to do that for them. And I get to do that for me also, because at the same time, I'm also a regular citizen who's doing a regular work. But it's just a work that allows me to do all these, wonderful things. I'll tell you, for example, when I like to tell this story a lot, because this is a very unique story. Many years ago, there was this story I had gone to do called. It was about snake charmers and the dilemma that they were facing because of deforestation, and there was a highway that was encroaching into their village, and so I'd gone to talk to them, and they were telling me about their problems. And in the course of the conversation, I suddenly got to know from one of them that that there's a village. I think the name of that village was, I forget, Musharu or something like that, where snake charmers are not allowed to enter. And I was like wondering, well, I mean, why? He said that man and snake cohabit very peacefully there. So I thought that this is ridiculous. I can't believe that. So he said, no, you go there and find out. So they gave me the directions, and it was quite a long way off. So I had to I had to walk across several paddy fields and finally reach this little village. It's an ancient village. It was, I think the village was established sometime in the 1900s or 1800s. It had an ancient temple, and the people there, they're very poor, but they kind of welcomed me, and I asked them that this is what I heard from these snake charmers. Is it true? And they said, yes, it's true. I mean, all over we have snakes all over this village, and the thing is that it didn't. I didn't see it immediately, but as I was wondering about the village, and there they were, a snake here, a snake there, and they were monocled cobras. And so I said, aren't you people afraid? He said, no, we're not afraid. The snakes don't harm us. They keep rogue snakes out of the village. And so there was a superstitious story involved and everything. So I don't want to get into that. And later I called up this herpetologist that I knew, and I asked him about it. And he said that, yeah, he had heard about that village too. And it was such a unique experience. There was this little girl who was telling me that she finds it difficult to study in the evenings because there's this particular cobra that lives inside her house, and that kind of rattles about all the all the utensils that are kept up on their loft. And so she was a little irritated by that. So I said, wow, this is a kind of place that people live like this. I had no idea about it. And so I wrote about it, and it was published. And then I think some foreign magazines, I don't want to mention the name, they also caught on to that, and they also wrote about it. And one of them wanted to come and check that place out, and they contacted me, but I was not in a position to escort them there. So I told them where it was so they could go. And this was about 10 years after I wrote that piece. And by that time, the Musharu, or I think that's the name of the village, that had become quite famous. And a lot of people would like to go there and see live snakes going around and not get bitten. And so these foreign journalists, they went there, and this is, I don't know how much this is, how far this is true, but the journalist who went with them later told me that the villagers had become wise to the whole publicity around them. So after the foreign journalists had taken the pictures and had done everything, they just shut the gates of the village and said, give us, I don't know how much money for temple building fund. or else we're going to set the snakes on you. You know, and I was like, wow, the 10 years, how publicity can change the attitude of people, because when I went there, they were so, I was one of the first journalists to perhaps go there, and they were so happy to show me around. And like, one person like showed me like another snake that was there. I mean, they were like identifying snakes for me here and there and everywhere. And then 10 years later, they were asking for temple building fund. It was, it was, it was a, I don't know, it was a lesson in sociology, I guess. It was a lesson in. So, yeah, so these are things that I get to experience firsthand, which I wouldn't have been able to experience if I did something else.
And there is no such treasure as just stories born out of human experience, I believe.
Absolutely.
When it comes to,
Absolutely.
When it comes to reporting for people's stories, I believe, and I happen to be a huge admirer of the long form style of journalism in which such human stories are explored to their absolute depth. And then there is no clear sense of conclusion. It just trails off because time goes on and human experience also goes on.
Yeah.
And the story keeps on going. The story keeps on breathing as the time goes by. I think that is a very captivating mode of telling stories like that.
And with the changing of times, human attitudes also change.
Absolutely, for sure. For sure. One of the pieces that I don't remember who wrote it or who published it. Maybe you could help me. There's a story called The Jungle Prince of Delhi, or the Jungle Prince of some place, and it narrates the story of a family that lives in the heart of the Delhi, like the forest surrounding Delhi, and how they have a story of them belonging to an erstwhile kingdom and how they were exiled out of the kingdom.
I read that. Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
So
and how they, and how they're continuing to live there, and their once palatial establishment has turned arboreal. Trees have infested inside the house.
Yes.
I remember that story. I had read that.
Yes.
I forget who wrote it, but it's a very nice story. I remember that.
So that's where I learned. So reading such stories, I learned that this form of long form exploration of human experience is something which is a treasure to behold and read for sure.
If I may ask one thing,
please,
can you share something that was really scary? Because I know both me and my students are fond of scary stuff.
Scary? Not really. I mean, I've always been pretty careful. I never put myself at risk.
Or maybe meeting somebody that was scary, something was that made you a little, basically to negotiate with a little bit of fear. Sorry about intervening, but I just couldn't, let go of that one.
No, but I'll tell you a funny story. I'm not going to mention any name. I'm not going to mention any.
Sure.
Of course.
There's this. My friend and I, we'd gone to. There was some election coverage. And hello?
Yes, sure. Please go.
So we had gone to this place to meet this leader, a local leader who was going to stand for election. And this guy was known to be kind of a sort of a Robin Hood figure. And he's also known to be kind of a tough guy. And so after we had interviewed him, as we were about to leave, he tells us to wait for a second. We need to just wait for a second. And we turn around to see two of his stuffs close in on the door so that we don't get out. So we're not going to, don't worry about that. We're not going to even try to leave. So we sat ourselves down and waited for what's going to happen next. And in walked a little man. He was little, but he looked fierce and very fit. And this particular leader then proceeded to talk to that little man and tell that little man to, he introduced us reporters as central investigative teams who had come down. And we're like, yo, what's going on here? And then and then he's telling that little fellow that, like, you know, you tell this person here, you tell these people here how you were made to how you were forced to make false allegations to the police against me. And this guy was like in a complete, he was in a quandary, because he had actually, I realized that he was perhaps forced to make he was forced to make these allegations against him, but he realized the power that this individual wielded, and had actually, after making those allegations, had come to him for protection and had given himself up to him rather than give himself up to the police for protection. So yeah, that was that. Those kind of things keep happening. Yeah. Another time there was another situation where I remember when during the Maoist movement at Lalgarh, and I was talking to, I had not yet spoken to the Maoist representatives, and I was generally talking to the government and, like, you know, getting information from them, when I suddenly get a call from one of their top leaders saying, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you talking to us? So I said, like, and I'm willing to talk to you. He said, you're talking to so-and-so, you're talking to so-and-so. Why aren't you talking to us? So I said, like, yeah, I'll definitely talk to you. I have no problems, you know, not talking to you. Then, you know, when you want to talk to this person, you talk to that person, and then you have to clear things up. You know, you have to clear it with the editor. You have to have the meetings with the editor and, like, you know, tell him that, like, you know, we have to do this. So that takes time. So because this is a fortnightly magazine, and so after a couple of days, he calls up and again sends a message saying, this is like pre-WhatsApp days. So, like, this is like SMS messages. So he's going saying, like, you know, what's the matter? Your bosses don't want you to talk to us or what? And I'm like, you know, no, that's not the case. We will talk to you, but we'll talk to you on our own terms. We're not going to talk to you because you want us to talk to you. So, you know, these kind of things happen. But, like, you know, I never put myself in any kind of danger. I like my life too much.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories, Suhrid. I believe that, you know, as you said, each day must be a thrilling experience to go through and chase a story and then go through the experiences that the story brings with it, and to tackle your own writing and your own quest for truth in the face of such extraordinary circumstances, if I may say so.
Well, we do live in extraordinary times. I think every age is an extraordinary age, and every age has its own stories to tell, and we are kind of reporting the stories of this age, and yeah.
Just the last question from my end to you, and then we'll throw the floor open for questions from the audience. This is a two-parter. So the first is, what do you consider to be good writing? And then what recommendations would you give to all of us to follow the practice of cultivating good writing?
Well, to me, good writing is something that puts across a message lucidly, elegantly, and as comprehensively as possible. Then comes the embellishment. Then you make it, you add things to it to make it more interesting. You give the history, you give whatever. But like, the main idea of good writing is to get the idea across as clearly and as lucidly as possible, and in as few words as possible.
Oh, okay. Okay. And how, if any recommendations as to how you practice it and how we can maybe imbibe a couple of habits from that?
Well, like, it's something that, I don't know whether I practice it or not. I mean, I don't know whether I try to, I try to do that. I try to send across my ideas as comprehensively as possible. And I guess the thing is, to do that, one needs to constantly work at one's craft. I have no, I'm not one of the fastest of writers. I mean, I might write a story very fast, but I don't like to miss deadlines. But I need to revise that story. I need to hone that story once I've written it. I need to tweak it. I need to constantly get back to it. And because I need to do that, I need to keep writing all the time. So what happens is, if something develops, I have a little notebook in which I write down the development, and I follow it up. And, that way I'm constantly, working on a developing issue. It need not develop at all. I may store it away for, for later. But I'm constantly writing on something or the other. And there's always something or the other to write on.
Certainly. We
are
as limited. Yeah, please go ahead.
Now, and the most important thing to do is to read as much as possible. To read without prejudice, to read, to read and to listen without prejudice. To accept all opinions, and to be a silent listener.
Thank you so much, Suhrid. This was an absolute honor to talk with you and to pick your brain on a couple of things about journalism and about writing. The floor is open for questions. I have a couple of questions in my DMs. If I could please.
Sure. Nivit, can I just ask you one quick question?
Yes, please.
There is something that I wanted to ask you, because you juggle with deadlines all the time, right? I mean, the last time I remember, not today, when I was speaking to you, basically you had to turn in a piece, and then somebody had died and you were running there to, write an obituary. And my entire class, a lot of students are here. All of them pushed the deadline back from, their papers were due on Thursday. So it all got pushed back to yesterday, okay?
Unacceptable.
No, but they happened, and I was just, being one time nice. And Joe, you and me, we were trying to put in something. Deadlines kept on shifting. So we do it all the time. Okay. So how do you manage that? Because you don't have this particular, what I could call, an absolutely bad luxury, right? So how do you manage that kind of writing and then covering, and so that hustle bustle, all of it?
Because like I said, the postponement of deadlines in our profession is unacceptable. We are not left with any choice. You have to submit the page goes for printing on this particular day. You have to submit it on that day. And yeah, sure. If it's a developing story, one talks to the editor, and fortunately we have a very accommodating editor who allows us to who gives us the leeway. But it's, I talking about deadlines, I'm reminded of a story that Hunter Thompson said once. He wrote about, and he always had problems with his deadline. And he described his deadline problems like the coyotes on the highway crossing the road. So there's ample time for a coyote to cross the road, but the coyote will not cross the road. The coyote will decide to cross the road only when it sees a car coming. And According to Hunter Thompson, that's what gives the coyote the kick. And so, I see myself too doing that, sitting around, wasting time, like, doing, serious digressions, trying to research on one thing and I'm led to another thing and another thing. And like, I'd perhaps start a research on, let's say, just for the sake of argument, Rabindranath Tagore. And 3 hours later, I'm looking up Paolo Rossi's score in the 1982 World Cup. So, and then I have to get back to, like, what's going on. So, yeah, so that's there.
Okay, thanks. Because the deadline always just mesmerizes me. Following deadlines, yes. David, please.
All right. Yes, I have people in chat. Guys, if you would like to ask the questions to Suhrid personally, nice. You can. Yeah, that would be really nice. If you could just unmute yourselves and go ahead. People who have DM'd me, if you would also like to ask the questions to Suhrid directly, you're most welcome to do so. Please let me know, and you can raise your hand and we can take on all the questions.
Yes,
Kshitish Chaudhary, if you could unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, Kshitish.
Am I audible? Hi, sir.
Yes,
first of all, thank you for taking out the time to meet with us and share your experience. It was very great listening to you.
It's my pleasure.
My question is inspired by an article I read recently. So there is this, it's a bit off question, but there is this great FBI hostage negotiator who negotiated hostages with international terrorists. And he mentions that how our entire life is just negotiation, and how he applied the tricks he learned at work to his non-professional life, like asking his child to sleep at 9 p.m. and bargaining with the shopkeepers. So my question is that, first of all, did you and how did you apply the skills that you learned in your professional life to your non-professional life?
The thing about our professional life is that they're very intrinsically linked with our non-professional life. Like, I'm writing in office and I'm writing at home. Yeah, but certainly I'm far more guarded when I'm talking to somebody. I'm far more guarded when I'm interviewing someone. So I don't think it really overlaps. I don't think I've in any way one affects the other. For example, one would think that a chess player's life would be extremely organized and very methodical, considering that he probably has 500 games memorized in his head. But like many chess players you see are complete wrecks. I look at the case of Bobby Fischer, or look at the case of Paul Morphy, and so, or even Capablanca. So you find that, like, their professional life really has little bearing on their personal life. But yeah, it's for example, it does help in the sense that my daughter is in class 10, and sometimes she needs a little bit of guidance on certain projects where my experience in journalism comes to use for her, but that's very little. So
okay, sir. Yes, that's very interesting to know.
Okay, may I request to ask the question? I'll ask, all of you will get a chance, but let me give Professor Majumdar is our guest of honor. So let me just, he's a guest and it's very kind of him to join. So let me give him the first chance and then you can all ask. Suhrid is a very dear friend, so he's not going to go away without answering your questions. Yes, Shankar, please.
Thank you, Shurmita. And I want to congratulate Nivid. You had some really amazing questions. You crafted the session.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Absolutely, Nivid. Thank you for those questions.
I was very struck by something Sharmita said early on, that you can't tell Suhrid from the different articles he writes, and that's remarkable. And I think we spoke a little bit about that, how you can suppress your voice. I think that's a wonderful lesson. One goes back and forth. And I know Shurid actually is also a poet and a songwriter. So, and I'm actually very interested. And it struck me that when he writes on poetry, like when he's writing on Shankho Ghosh, when he's writing on Apanna Sen, you are, I mean, I wonder if you still keeping that same kind of political objectivity, that when you're writing on art, because I notice you do write on music, film, sometimes on literature, but of course you're negotiating that, and I do see that same um, kind of objectivity. And it also struck me very much when you said that facts can be arranged, so the arrangement of facts is, and I'd love to hear more on that too, but basically two questions. One is the question, how does one arrange facts differently without making it different? And the other is when you move from, say, political journalism to sort of cultural journalism, so to say. Now, I think the cultural journalism is a bad word. Let's be more specific. Poetry, film, sort of artistic pursuits. Do you see a difference? Because you often write obituaries of musicians and those and other people as well. So how do you negotiate this question of voice and effacement when you deal with different things?
See, Shoykot, I absolutely let myself go when I'm writing on non-political matters. I'm completely not guarded at all. I am far more subjective in my interpretation of, let's say, if I'm writing on, on BB King after he died, or on Chuck Berry, or on, David Bowie, or Shankho Ghosh, or even Dylan getting the Nobel Prize. I'm holding nothing back. Like, what you're seeing there is not not so much Shurid the journalist as, Shurid the fan of Bowie, Shurid the fan of Chuck Berry, Shurid the fan of BB King, Shurid the fan of Shankho Ghosh. So, yeah, I mean, that's, or when I'm writing on sports, particularly football, or when I'm writing on Diego Maradona or the East Bengal, or if I'm writing on the World Cup, I just allow I give myself the pleasure of dropping all my guard and, like, going for it, just holding nothing back. And
But even your style is very restrained. I've noticed. I read those articles quite carefully as well as I read your Bengal coverage. That there's a restraint in your style. Facts are still there. You don't quite write like an opinion piece.
oh, no,
I
no,
mean,
no.
I'd write if I'm writing on the same subject, but you're still writing, in a different way.
That
So
that's because I'm a working journalist, and being a working journalist, there's a difference between, like, uh, the way a working journalist will approach a particular topic, or will approach a subject, and the way, let's say, a celebrated novelist like yourself will approach the subject. No, no, come on. Hey, my next book, like,
That's absolutely true.
you,
he likes to call me out. Okay, I'll let that pass. But yeah.
you're one of my favorite novelists, man. If I don't call you a celebrated novelist, who do I call a celebrated novelist?
Thank you. Thank you. No, I really admired that. I really admired that you move between these different archives. And yet, I mean, you're my prime source of news of Bengal. And since I've lived away
Yeah,
from now.
that's what gives me that one gives me relief from the other. So, like, writing on, and I don't know, the writing on an undiscovered, a newly discovered hymn of Rabindranath Tagore by uh, Debashish Rai Chaudhuri is such a relief to write on. When you've written 5 consecutive articles on the politics of West Bengal or whatever. So it's a welcome break to write on these things.
Right, right. But even in politics, I don't want to take too much time. Just last bit of the question that I know
But
you're
that
working
but
with.
that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I wait for people to die to write on them.
I know that does make me feel a bit ominous. I know. So I'm still here. So no, but Shurit, at the same time, you've been with Frontline, a publication with a very pronounced political sort of bent, right? And I'm wondered how you do manage to strike a certain note of neutrality compared to at least many other journalists I know. And yet, Frontline is not necessarily known to be a neutral publication.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think Frontline is a very neutral publication. Uh, it may have a slant, but if you read Frontline's articles, I mean, they incorporate every aspect. I mean, there's no way where, Frontline, anyone can, uh, a person may disagree with a particular thing that Frontline has written, but they can never say that what Frontline has written is wrong, either, morally or factually. So it's just like, it's the way a person may disagree with what I write. A person may disagree with what my take on a particular thing is. But like I said, like they may say that there was no need for me to uh, point out a particular aspect of a development, which may appear unrelated to them, but does not appear unrelated to me.
Right. Thank you.
What I'm trying to say is, that every organization will have a political slant, but the thing about Frontline, the thing that I take pride in working for Frontline is that it's always been asking the difficult questions. It's always been asking questions that not just to one particular party, it's been asking its questions to all parties. It has not spared anyone, which
Fair.
is, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
Sanjay, I'll take the names from here. Sanjay, you can go and ask your questions, and there are questions in the chat box from Palak, Uttara, and Rushik, and which I'll read out. So, but Sanjay, you can go and ask, and then after that, Gautam, you can go.
Hi, sir. So again, thank you. Thanks a lot for spending time with us. So my
Hi,
question
Sanjay.
is, yeah. So my question is slightly non-technical. So this is an issue that I often face. So because we're in this like information era where a lot of us rely on sources like Twitter and other short articles to really catch up with the news, we're exposed to a lot of like political views which are out of context, and sometimes it's hard for us to filter out the biases and really take in only the facts. So given this current the current age we are in, so how would you say we should go about trying to process or like trying to fetch only the facts and build our own political opinion about different issues?
Well, first of all, to build your own political opinion is a very subjective matter. For that, you have to you have to search within yourself and ask yourself certain questions. As for, yes, you're right. In this age of fake news and social media, where there is this surfeit of information, and let's say a large percentage of it is like way off the mark, one has to rely on certain sources of information that one can know to be authentic, and one has to what should I say? One has to expand one's reading and try and get the same information from as many sources as possible. And for example, there are videos that are often very provocative videos that are put up on social media, and they're made viral by people sharing them. But upon closer look, you realize that these videos have absolutely no basis. They have no relation with the truth at all. They may be from a totally different country. And so I would say that one needs to treat everything. There was this poster that I had seen many years ago at a book fair, which I really liked, and I had bought it and I've lost it. And that was a poster of Karl Marx, which just said one thing, which is doubt everything. The moment you start doubting everything, you will actually be finding the truth somewhere, even doubt the truth.
Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thanks for that.
Gautam, Nikhar, you will be next.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. So again, thank you, sir, for spending your time. And it's been really good to hear. More or less, I think that all the questions that have been answered, I think a lot of them were things that I really was wanting to ask, and they've all sort of really given us some sort of clarity. So thanks a lot for that. My question is sort of in continuance to what I think Sanjay said, but maybe in sort of a parallel context. So what happens for me is that instead of thinking about the shorter durations and the large amount of influx of media, when I instead go through perhaps interviews, long interviews of a lot of political, a lot of political influencers, I feel that these people are very persuasive, and that given enough amount of time, what they feel or what they think about, they have the capacity to sort of engrave that on me and sort of build that in my opinion. And I find it very difficult to be able to not get persuaded by what one person is saying, given their level of skill at this task. So my question to you is that how do you sort of cut through what is something that's just being used as a way of persuasion and actually build an opinion that's rational? And once you do build it, how do you present it in a way that there's no bias attached to it? Because like you said, that when you do practice restraint when you're writing political things, because it's when it's cultural, it becomes easier because there's no the nitty-gritties involved are perhaps a little less, but when it's political, there are a lot of restraints attached to it. So how do you sort of make sure that the things you're writing are really things that mattered throughout that report, throughout that interview, maybe?
Very simple. A political person will always uphold the point of view of his particular political party and her ideology. That may have nothing to do with the reality around. So alongside those interviews, one also, as a reporter, one also needs to have one's ear close to the ground and talk to the common people, and talk to the people who are affected, and put up their views alongside the views of the political parties. And for every argument that one political party or one individual presents, there will be another that will refute it. There will be counter arguments, and the biggest what's the term for it? I would say the biggest expose would be the words of the common people, and they would just tell you that all that around them has nothing to do with their reality. So, like, for example, during the Vajpayee era, there was this the India Shining. Remember India Shining was the campaign, and what we did at that time was to go to parts of India which were not shining, and the people there, we had the stalwarts of various parties talking about India Shining, and then there were these people unheard of, nobody knew their names, nobody cared about them, telling us that here we are sitting in darkness. So yeah, that's how we do it. That's how we balance things. And like I said, doubt everything that anyone tells you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, ma'am. So
since we're already behind time, I mean, we'll stop. I mean, we'll just take the questions that are already in the chat box. Okay. So, I mean, after Nikhar, we'll take the ones that are in the chat box. Okay. Because we are now running out of time. Yes, Nikhar, go ahead, please.
yeah, so before I start, thank you, Sharmita ma'am, Suhrid sir, Nivid sir, and everyone who has made this
Welcome,
talk possible. Yeah, so I have two questions actually. First is that, so I guess interviewing someone is an integral part of your job, right? So I believe it is all about leading a conversation and trying to get the best out of the person who you are interviewing.
Yes.
So how do you prepare the set of questions, and how do you link all those questions to develop an interesting conversation? So I guess both Suhrid sir and Nivid Nirit sir can answer these questions, since Nirit sir is the interviewer today, right? So
Well, I can say for myself that I do the necessary research. If there is something happening, I go to the ground and I see what is happening, and then I present the questions accordingly, and ask the questions to the person concerned. But yeah, there has to be prior research. I mean, I'm not going to go and talk to a person unprepared, because that'll be a waste of time for me and a waste of time for that individual too. It'll serve no purpose.
All right. Thanks, Suhrid. Thanks, Nikhar. Okay, I'm taking Rushik's question. He's typed it here. I have observed that whenever I write, I feel that I'm not being honest to myself and feel that these thoughts that I'm putting down are not my own always. How can I defeat this? He has a two-part question, but since we have lots of questions, I'm taking the first part, okay? How do you think I can defeat that?
No, but that depends on what you're writing and for whom are you writing. If you're writing for yourself and not being honest about it, well, then you're playing games with yourself. If you're writing for something and you feel you're not being honest about it and you're being paid for it, then I'd say you're a professional.
Thanks, Suhrid. That was a good take. Okay, there is Suryansh asking, part of it you have already answered. It's like with the digital media on rise, a lot of articles are being published at an unprecedented rate. However, I have come across many articles that are erroneous, even by quite famous names. Why is that? Okay, anyway, what the last part of the question is, I think you've already talked about the former part, the rise of the media and the information. Sanjay asked that. So do you think is the quality of writing overall, there is a decline and are articles not being proofread well enough these days? So what is your comment on that, Suhrid?
I don't know. I mean, really, I have seen some excellent articles. And to tell you the truth, yeah, some articles, that's always been the case. I mean, there have been good articles and there have been bad articles. You need to fill up a newspaper, you need to fill up a magazine, and not all the articles are of, equal standard. So, yeah, there'll be good articles, there'll be bad articles, and one needs to weed out the bad ones and read the good ones.
Okay.
I don't think there's, there's enough good articles to, I don't think there's any reason to complain. I think there are a lot of good writers and they're still writing, they're doing excellent stuff these days.
Okay. Too. Thanks, Suhrid. The next question is from Uttara. She writes, hello, sir. Could you tell us about your struggles you faced in writing yourself? So she has again a two-part question, but I'm taking the former one. Something that you struggle with while you write.
I always struggle while I write. It's true. When I'm writing, there's always a level of doubt. There's always a level of self-doubt. Is it good enough? How can I improve it? Have I covered all the points? Have I taken any, have I taken any liberties? Should I have used that phrase? Should I? I'm always full of self-doubt. So, if one is serious about anything, one will always have to struggle with it. For example, again, sports journalism is something that I love reading on sports, and I love sports. So I always draw parallels with sports, and to make a particular ball swerve into the goal, Roberto Carlos had probably kicked the same ball 2 million times, and I'm sure every time, even at the height of his career, when he was kicking the ball, I'm sure there was self-doubt. There was there was the struggle of, will I be able to put it into the back of the net? So I think, struggle is good. I think self-doubt is good. I think it keeps you on your toes and not take things for granted.
Okay, I'm sure there's a question from Palak. She says, good evening. I think you partly answered this, but if you want to add something, in what ways has journalism as a career affected your personal life? The balance between the personal and the professional.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's made me largely a happy person. I don't dread going to work. I'm as long as I have, as long as I'm able to write, as long as I'm able to like meet people, go to places and do the kind of job that I do, I'm a happy person. So I guess that affects my personal life also. That affects my family and that affects my health. So, yeah.
Yeah, happiness spreads happiness. That's a big thing. Adesh asks, considering the political scenario in India and West Bengal, from where do you gather the courage to bring the reality of politics to the common people? And here is a second part, which is also even bit more. Have you ever faced any consequences for voicing your opinions? You don't have to necessarily take the second one, but at least where do you get the courage to report the truth?
The firm belief that nobody reads me.
I do. Shoykot does. Come on, that's a bit too much. Okay.
Yeah, most definitely do. I read him very regularly.
Yeah, so do I. So see, he's not even considering us as anybody. See how horrible.
I'm fortunately, the two of you are not dangerous. So it's okay. I'm sure the dangerous people don't read me.
Sharmita, we have to try to be dangerous. We need to raise our danger.
Yes, we need to be. Okay, there's a question for Astha. Okay, I think you've already answered this. At what point did you choose journalism as a career option? How would you already talked about this? How would a person decide whether they want to have a career in journalism? So how does one decide on a career in journalism? Any tips on that, Suhrid?
Well, see, the journalism in my days was a little different because I remember when I became like I said, I actually joined the profession through a process of elimination. There were certain, publishing, advertising, journalism, the corporate sector, public relations. These are the kind of things that I felt were open to me. Pretty mediocre student with no scientific aptitude. Or
you could become a teacher like me, Suhrid. We were both at almost on the same level. You had a better writing skills than me.
You were a far superior student than I ever was.
Let's cut that. Okay.
So what happened was, but it was fortunate because we had quite a number of newspapers which were which I could write for. I mean, certain people who were slightly older than me, slightly older friends, they were making a decent amount of. This was when I was class 12, first year college. So they were making a decent amount of money by doing music reviews and writing little feature pieces for one particular organization. I remember used to pay 50 paisa per word, another 75 paisa per word, and another one, princely, 1 rupees 50 paisa per word, plus traveling expenses. And so for an 18-year-old, that keeps you in cigarettes and beer for for enough money if you have a continuous flow of articles coming out. So so that's how it happened. Essentially in a few years, I built up a pretty decent portfolio from writing for all these papers. And strangely, the first job that I got was a financial newspaper. I actually started my career as a financial reporter. And after a couple of years, I joined Frontline in 1998. And that's where I stayed. And that's where I felt most peaceful.
Thanks, Suhrid. Here is another one. My students are asking you more questions than they ever asked me in class. Believe me. Okay. This is from Gaurav. As a successful journalist, how do you deal with the pressure while writing a new article that many people will form opinions and also make decision based on your writing?
Well, this is, see, I do, again, like I said, I have way too much respect for my readers to think that they will form an opinion based on what I write. What I write, they will take into consideration along with a whole lot of other things that, they read from everywhere else. And from there, all of it, including what I write, will perhaps help them to form an opinion on a prevalent situation. But yeah, see, I don't really, the pressure of writing is something that we have to deal with every day because this is our job. And it's not so much the pressure of writing or the deadlines. It is, again, like I said, the constant fear of not putting out a decent bit of writing, not of submitting something that is not up to the, up to frontline standard. So I feel, I've always felt that it's very important to not take one's position in an organization for granted, and just simply because one has attained a seniority here by just sticking around for so long. But still, one should always try to do the best that one can, and for that one needs to continuously work at one's craft.
Thanks, Suhrid. Here is somebody, Siddhi. She says something which is, a little different from what we have been talking about. She says that I think it is important that there should be some amount of bias of the writer in presenting a news for the common people to not just read, but also help them to form opinions. Do you think I am wrong in thinking so?
Not at all. It depends on what kind of a writer you wish to be. I mean, I know so many writers who very openly present their opinion. To tell you the truth, I also present my bias through my writing, but I wouldn't like to make a direct statement of that. I would rather imply, like Shoykot just mentioned, when it's in the arrangement of the facts that you're presenting, that itself can tell a story. But the moment you start expressing a private opinion, as a journalist, as a working journalist, I feel that when one is writing a story or doing an analysis, one's personal bias, if stated in a very pronounced manner, can lead to the loss of credibility, because that is not what we are supposed to do. That's my feeling, and many people may completely disagree with me, but I'm a little bit of I'm kind of old school here a little bit. No, sure, I have my bias, but I'm not going to wear my bias on my sleeve.
Yes. So Suhrid, thanks. And so the next question is exactly a follow-up on that. So how do you actually do that? This is from Shiril, and he says, how do you make sure that your personal opinions or your bias is not reflected in some of your in your writings? So this is how do you make sure that doesn't happen?
I don't make any direct statements. I write in a manner which I hope to write. I try to write in a manner where the facts will speak for themselves.
All right. Okay, two more questions. As I said, I don't get asked so many questions in class. Okay. So, all right. So there is a one from Shruti. Okay, some of you can you just mute yourself because I'm reading out the ones in the chat box. Good evening, sir. Being a working journalist, you are always dealing with factual writing, of course. But do you read creative literature like fiction? And if so, how do you feel creative writing helps your own writing?
I only read fiction. I mostly read fiction. I love fiction. I've always read fiction. I read other stuff too, but like, fiction is what I always go back to. I love fiction.
And then how does that influence your own writing?
Everything one reads, I'm not talking about subject matter, but stylistically, I'm sure like, all that I've read has played a part in the evolution of my style.
Thank you. The last question, Suhrid, we have been going on till 7:24. Thank you for giving us all this time. Okay.
There have
been a couple. There have been a couple that have been sent to me on direct message. Can I post?
Okay.
Them,
okay. Yes. There's the last one from me, and then Rivid, you can do that. Okay. Just hold on.
Okay. Okay.
See, that is the advantage of friendship that I'm going to take, right? Okay. That Suhrid will answer the questions. Yes. This is from Orindam. He asks, "Good evening, sir. When you interview someone who has just been through something very traumatic, say a traumatic incident, how do you take that interview so that the question does not trigger the trauma buried in someone's mind?"
No, that one must be delicate about it. Like, one has to be, first of all, one has to have a level of, when one is dealing with human beings, when one is dealing with fellow human beings, one has to be very empathetic, and there has to be sympathy for a person. So it has to be managed in a manner which is it has to be done in a manner which is very delicate, and that is entirely how you perceive the situation to be, and how it's also something, you see, when one is confronted with that kind of tragedy or grief, one does get affected oneself, and that dictates one's behavior. Any normal person will be affected by a fellow human being's grief, and will be affected by any kind of tragedy, but and automatically one's behavior will change. So that's something what the situation precipitates by itself. I mean, I don't have to do anything about it.
Thank you, Suhrid.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Nivid, you can take the question.
Yes, yeah, I just have one question from Diya Sengupta, who has sent it to me on direct message. In the era of fake news, how do you ensure that your sources are rock solid? This is not just important for a journalist, but also for someone like me who works in a corporate house.
No, you build up your source base, and so it's the relationship between a source and a journalist is a special one. It's based on trust. It's also based on a kind of what's the term? A symbiotic relationship where both gain something from it. Both are, but often sources are wrong. Often one has to protect oneself in case one has to protect. As a journalist, I feel one has to protect oneself under all circumstances, and cannot take anybody's word for granted, cannot take anybody's word as gospel, because one can be taken to court, one should always have the necessary backup to support oneself, however much one may trust one's source.
Thank you, Suhrid. Sanket Wadhwana, do you have a question or comment? That will be the last one, by the way, audience. And thank you so much for your questions.
So, so I have a very simple and kind of personal question. So, sir, as you said that missing deadlines is not acceptable in your career, in your profession. So, like when you have multiple, deadlines or deadlines. So I often found myself, get stuck when you have to write things. So at some point of time, you get stuck. Like I'm not able to write, or you are not able to literally write anything, or not getting any idea. So like, what to do when do you face this kind of things, or?
Oh yeah, often. This is something that happens all the time. Like, you're in the middle, and like you're in the middle, you get this, not just see, it's not creative writing. I can't call it writer's block, but you come to a point where you're not being able to take the story forward anymore because of certain situations. So uh, you you try and explore other avenues. You sometimes it's even good to, like, leave it aside for a while. Like, personally, uh, what I do is, if I'm stuck with a particular thing, I generally go out for a walk, or you know think it through in my head, uh, and then do something completely unrelated, uh, you know uh, and let it work itself out in my head. um, you know, maybe try and solve a chess puzzle, or concentrate on something completely different. And often I find that doing that thing helps the in the resolution of the problem that I'm facing. And it happens kind of automatically, but sometimes it doesn't, but often it does, just by doing something else.
Thank you so much, Suhrid, for being so patient and answering
My
every single
pleasure.
question that all the audience members had. Any concluding words from your end? And then maybe after that, Professor Lahiri and Julian can take over with a vote of thanks.
No, I loved it. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much. I loved answering your questions, Nivid, and I loved answering each and every question. I had a great time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. It was an absolute honor to be speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yes, Professor Lahiri, Julian, please take it up.
Yes, I'll let Jo Young take over, but before that, Suhrid, thanks a lot for all the time for this extremely wonderful conversation. Thank you, Professor Shrikat Majumdar, for joining. Thanks to everybody who joined today, because Suhrid is a dear friend, and I did want people to listen to him, because in the morning he told me that I always sit on the other side of the chair. I interview people. I don't give interviews. So I really wanted to have a wonderful audience, and thank you all the students and everyone who joined today for being such a wonderful, wonderful audience. Jo Young, over to you, please. And Shrikat, can't thank you enough for giving us this another, round of extra time.
I follow Suhrid's work very carefully, so this was a great pleasure to hear him talk about it.
Thank you. Jo Young, over to you, please. Yes.
There's not much that I can say, because I had a lot of questions, because it was quite exciting to have a working journalist who is especially from the Hindu and the Frontline Magazine. And I had a lot of questions, but thankfully Nivid and Sharmita and everyone else, gave us similar questions. So my questions were resolved. So thank you so much, Professor Lahiri. Thank you so much, Suhrid and the Saikat. And
thank you, Jo Young. Really had a great time. Thank you so much.
Jo Young, why did you call me Professor Lahiri suddenly and everybody Suhrid Shrikat? What happened?
I mean, in this situation, I was like, it was recorded, so I was like, maybe should I go with
Sharmita is the one who has the scary personality. We are looking for somebody with
I scare people. I am the scary one in class. Yes. Agree on that. Agree on that. Yeah.
I fail, so.
And then, yes, I could see that our audience were pretty much enjoying this session. I could see like a very passionate comments and the questions. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and then guys, stay tuned for the next edition of Writers at Work.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.